Sam Riley cursed under his breath as the navigation display flickered and went dark for the third time in an hour. His cargo hauler's aging systems were finally giving up after years of hard service across the frontier worlds. The warning lights bathed the small cockpit in angry red as his ship limped toward the nearest port, which happened to be Crimson Harbor, a place he'd avoided for good reason during his 5 years hauling supplies between human colonies. Crimson Harbor had a reputation that made experienced pilots nervous. It sat in neutral space where 3 different alien territories met, making it a haven for smugglers, pirates, and anyone else who preferred to avoid official scrutiny. His ship's engines made concerning grinding noises as he requested docking permission from the harbor's automated systems, which responded in a mixture of languages he barely recognized. The place truly was as lawless as the story suggested. The docking fees alone made him wince, but he had little choice with his navigation computer completely dead, and his backup systems showing warning signs that made his engineer training scream in alarm after securing his ship and arranging for repairs with a Vorthak mechanic who quoted prices that would eat into his profit margins for months. Sam found himself with several hours to kill while waiting for parts. The upper levels of Crimson Harbor bustled with legitimate traders and travelers, but Sam's curiosity led him toward the lower decks where the real business of the station took place, away from any pretense of galactic law. The air grew thicker with strange smells, and the lighting dimmed as he descended through maintenance shafts and service corridors, following the sound of voices speaking in hushed tones. What he found in the forgotten cargo bay made his blood run cold. Dozens of beings from various species stood chained or caged, while alien traders negotiated prices with potential buyers. Sam had read about slave markets in historical texts about humanity's dark past, but seeing one operating in the present made him feel sick to his stomach as memories of Earth's own shameful history came flooding back. Most of the slaves appeared broken, their eyes empty of hope as they waited to be sold like cargo, but one small form in the corner caught his attention with its defiant posture. The creature was barely the size of a large cat, covered in scales that should have gleamed but looked dull from poor care, and it had wings folded tight against its back, despite heavy shackles that sparked with energy. Its reptilian head turned toward him as he approached, and Sam found himself looking into eyes that held an intelligence far beyond what he expected from what the traders were calling a domesticated fire lizard. The young dragon's mental voice touched his mind with startling clarity, speaking words that would haunt him. "Human, I see kindness in your thoughts where others see only profit. Can you buy me and take me as your servant?" Sam staggered backward, not from fear but from shock at hearing telepathic communication for the first time in his life, especially from a being the traders were describing as nothing more than an exotic pet. The lead trader, a massive Vorthak with scarred hide and cybernetic implants, noticed Sam's interest and approached with the predatory smile of someone sensing a potential sale. "Ah, human customer shows interest in our prize specimen," the trader said in heavily accented standard, gesturing toward the chained dragon with one of his 4 arms. This young fire breather was captured during recent pacification of wild dragon nest. Very rare to find one so young and trainable for off-world buyers. Sam tried to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced, but the dragon's telepathic voice continued to whisper in his thoughts with desperate hope mixed with resignation. Most buyers want larger specimens for military applications, but this one perfect for personal protection or entertainment. Small, enough for ship quarters, intelligent enough to follow complex commands. The price the Vorthak quoted made Sam's head spin. It represented more money than he'd saved in 3 years of cargo runs, more than his ship was worth even in good condition. Fire-breathing abilities have been suppressed with neural dampeners, the trader continued, tapping the glowing shackles that bound the dragon's small form. But potential for controlled flame. Production remains high once proper conditioning begins. Previous owner made mistake of treating creature too softly, so we offer complete retraining services. Sam felt his hands clench into fists as he listened to the casual way the trader discussed what was clearly a sentient being as nothing more than property to be bought and trained. The dragon's mental voice grew quieter, as if it sensed his internal struggle. "I understand if you cannot afford me, kind human. I have learned not to hope too much." Other potential buyers circled the small dragon, discussing its potential uses in terms that made Sam's stomach turn as they debated whether it would be better as a weapon or a status symbol. A group of hegemony officials examined the dragon's teeth and claws while discussing modifications that could enhance its combat effectiveness for their private armies. Sam watched the dragon's reaction to their rough handling. It remained perfectly still and compliant, but he could see the intelligence behind its eyes processing every detail of its situation. "This specimen shows excellent conditioning already," one of the officials noted approvingly. "Previous training has eliminated most of the natural aggression we usually see in wild dragons." The dragon's telepathic voice carried a note of bitter irony. "They broke my spirit before they broke my body. Human. Now they celebrate how well-trained their victim has become." Sam realized he was witnessing something that went beyond simple slavery. This was the systematic destruction of a sentient being's identity and will to resist. The neural dampeners weren't just suppressing the dragon's fire abilities, they were suppressing its very sense of self, turning a proud, intelligent creature into a compliant tool. "I want to examine this one more closely," Sam heard himself saying, though his mind screamed that he couldn't afford such an expensive purchase. The Vorthak trader's eyes lit up with greed as he gestured for Sam to approach, clearly sensing a serious buyer despite the human's modest appearance. As Sam knelt beside the chained dragon, its mental voice grew stronger. "You are different from the others. Your thoughts carry pain at seeing me like this, not excitement. At owning me." The dragon's small form trembled slightly, whether from fear or hope Sam couldn't tell, but something in that moment made his decision for him. He looked up at the waiting trader and said words that would change both their lives forever. "What exactly would I need to do to purchase this dragon?" The Vorthak's scarred face split into a predatory grin as he began explaining payment options and transfer procedures, while the dragon's mental voice whispered with something that might have been the first hope it had felt in years. Sam knew he was about to make the most financially irresponsible decision of his life. But as he looked into those intelligent eyes, he also knew it might be the most important thing he'd ever do. The other buyers continued their brutal examinations of potential purchases around them. But for Sam, the rest of the slave market faded away as he focused on one small dragon, whose fate now rested in his hands. The numbers on Sam's personal credit account seemed to mock him as he stared at the holographic display, calculating and recalculating the impossible mathematics of buying the dragon's freedom, even liquidating his emergency fund, selling his grandfather's antique navigation tools, and pawning his service medals from the Colonial Defense Force wouldn't come close to the price the Vorthak demanded. The dragon had remained silent in his mind since their initial contact, perhaps sensing the hopelessness of his financial situation, and not wanting to add to his distress with desperate pleas. Sam found himself walking through Crimson Harbor's merchant quarter, approaching dealers and pawn shops with increasing desperation as he converted everything of value into credits. His emergency beacon went for half its worth to a sketchy electronics dealer who didn't ask questions about why a cargo pilot needed to sell safety equipment so urgently. The jacket his sister gave him when he first started piloting, embedded with smart fabric that regulated temperature and provided basic medical monitoring, disappeared into another shop for far less than its replacement cost. His personal sidearm, a reliable plasma pistol that had saved his life twice during pirate encounters, joined the growing pile of sacrificed possessions as Sam watched his credit balance slowly climb. Still, the amount fell woefully short of what he needed, and Sam knew he was running out of things to sell when he found himself staring at his ship's registration pad. The cargo hauler represented 15 years of his working life. Every credit he'd saved from dangerous runs to frontier worlds, every upgrade he'd slowly added to make her more reliable and efficient. His hand shook slightly as he accessed the ship's ownership documents, knowing that using her as collateral meant risking not just his livelihood but his home and his freedom to travel the stars. The loan officer at Crimson Harbor's financial district was a cold-eyed Zentauran who dealt in high-risk transactions for beings who couldn't secure legitimate financing elsewhere. "Your vessel's condition reports show extensive wear and outdated systems," she noted, her four eyes scanning the technical data with mechanical precision. "Current market value places her at approximately 60% of your requested loan amount. Insufficient collateral for the sum you require." Sam felt his last hope slipping away until he remembered the one thing he hadn't yet considered: his pilot's certification and clean record with the Colonial Trade Commission. "What if I add my commercial pilot's license as additional collateral?" he asked, knowing he was potentially signing away his entire future career. The Zentaran's interest sharpened as she pulled up his service record, noting his spotless safety rating and his clearance for high-value cargo runs in disputed space. "Licensed human pilot with frontier experience has significant value in current markets," she mused, her tone becoming more respectful. "We could structure this as an indenture contract. Your ship plus your services for a specified period to guarantee the loan." Sam's mind reeled at the implications. He would essentially become a contract pilot, bound to work specific routes chosen by the lenders until his debt was paid. The interest rates were criminal, the payment schedule would keep him in debt for years, and failure to make payments would cost him both his ship and his freedom. But as he thought about the small dragon waiting in chains, accepting its fate with quiet dignity, Sam found himself agreeing to terms that any rational person would reject. The contract signing took place in a dingy office that smelled of recycled air and broken dreams, witnessed by beings who made their living off others' desperation. Sam's thumbprint on the electronic pad felt like signing his own death warrant, but it also represented the dragon's only chance at freedom from a life of servitude. The Zentaran transferred the credits to his account with the efficiency of someone who'd processed countless such transactions, each representing a life forever changed by desperate circumstances. Armed with the necessary funds, Sam made his way back to the slave market, passing other buyers who were still examining their potential purchases with casual cruelty. The Vorthak. Traders' surprise at seeing Sam return with the full purchase amount was almost comical, as if he'd expected the human to quietly disappear like so many other window shoppers. "Excellent choice, human customer," the trader said while processing the payment. "This specimen will provide many years of faithful service with proper handling." The dragon's mental voice returned as Sam approached, carrying notes of confusion and disbelief. "You actually came back. I thought perhaps I had imagined your kindness. I still cannot comprehend why you would spend such fortune on a creature like me." The dragon continued. "Other buyers see weapon or status symbol, but your thoughts remain unclear to me." The transfer of ownership involved more paperwork than Sam expected, including care instructions, feeding schedules, and warnings about maintaining the neural dampeners that kept the dragon compliant. "Most important to remember that dragons require firm authority," the Vorthak explained, while handing over the control device for the neural shackles. "Show weakness or excessive kindness and their natural arrogance returns. Then you have dangerous beast instead of useful servant." Sam accepted the control device with growing disgust, knowing that every word the trader spoke revealed the systematic process of breaking sentient beings into useful tools. The dragon watched this exchange with eyes that held depths of intelligence the traders either couldn't see or chose to ignore, for the sake of their profitable business. "Remember that previous owner's mistake was treating this one too much like person instead of property," the Vorthak continued, "led to behavioral problems that required expensive reconditioning." As the final transfer documents processed, Sam knelt beside the dragon and spoke aloud for the first time since arriving at the market. "What do you want to be called?" The question seemed to shock everyone present. The traders stopped their conversations, other buyers turned to stare, and the dragon's mental voice carried pure bewilderment. "Masters do not ask slaves for preferences," the dragon replied telepathically. "We are given designations based on function or owner's whim." "I'm asking what name you would choose for yourself," Sam insisted, ignoring the trader's expressions of confusion and disapproval at his unconventional approach. The dragon was quiet for so long that Sam began to worry he'd somehow caused offense, but finally the mental voice returned with hesitant uncertainty. "In the time before capture, in dreams of home I barely remember, I think I was called something like Ember. But that was different life, different self." "Then Ember it is," Sam said firmly. "That's who you are, not what anyone decides to make you." The Vorthak trader shook, his head at what he clearly saw as human foolishness, but the credits had already cleared and the transaction was complete. Sam carefully lifted Ember's small form, noting how light the dragon felt despite the heavy neural shackles, as if captivity had worn away everything but the essential core of its being. "I pledge my service to you, Master Sam," Ember said formally, following what was clearly learned. "Protocol, my fire, my flight, my life are yours to command." "We'll talk about that once we're somewhere private," Sam replied, already planning the first of many conversations that would challenge everything Ember had been taught about its place in the universe. As they left the slave market behind, Sam caught glimpses of other buyers completing their own transactions, treating sentient beings like luxury goods or tools. But in his arms, Ember's weight felt like the most important cargo he'd ever carried, and the debt he'd taken on seemed like a small price to pay for giving one being back its chance at freedom. The repair bay's harsh lighting revealed the true extent of Ember's condition. As Sam gently placed the small dragon on his ship's medical scanner, noting the dull scales and visible malnutrition that captivity had inflicted, "Master Sam, this servant does not require medical attention," Ember protested telepathically. "Resources should not be wasted on property maintenance unless combat efficiency is compromised." Sam ignored the protest and activated the scanner, watching readouts that told a story of systematic abuse disguised as training, chemical suppressants in the bloodstream, stress markers indicating chronic fear, and signs of nutritional deficiencies that spoke of deliberate deprivation. "First lesson about being on my ship," Sam said, while programming the medical bay's treatment cycle. "Nobody calls themselves property here." The neural shackles sparked ominously as Ember tried to process this statement, clearly struggling with concepts that contradicted everything it had been taught about the relationship between dragons and their owners. Sam spent several minutes studying the shackles' locking mechanism, recognizing the cruel efficiency of a device designed not just to suppress abilities but to cause pain when the wearer attempted independent thought. "Master, removing neural dampeners without proper conditioning protocols could result in dangerous behavioral regression," Ember warned, though its mental voice carried an undertone of desperate hope. "I'm willing to risk it," Sam replied, activating the release sequence he'd found in the ownership documentation. "You deserve to decide what kind of being you want to be." The shackles fell away with a soft clatter that seemed to echo through the ship's small cabin, like the sound of chains breaking throughout history. Ember's reaction was immediate and profound. Scales that had appeared dull suddenly began to show hints of deep crimson color, and small wisps of flame flickered around its nostrils for the first time in months. "I can feel myself again," Ember whispered in amazement, flexing wings that had been held rigid by the neural dampeners. "The fire inside is not gone, only sleeping." Sam activated the ship's automated kitchen, programming it to prepare the high-protein, mineral-rich diet the medical scanner recommended for dragon physiology. "Master, the servant has not earned feeding privileges," Ember said automatically, then seemed startled by its own words. "Forgive me, the conditioning responses are deeply embedded." "Stop calling me master," Sam said firmly while placing the nutrient-rich meal before Ember. "My name is Sam, and I'd prefer if you used it." The weeks that followed became a gradual process of unlearning years of psychological conditioning, as Sam's cargo routes took them through the frontier. Systems, Ember proved to be an incredibly quick study when its natural intelligence was allowed to function, mastering the ship's navigation systems and technical manuals, with an enthusiasm that reminded Sam why he'd fallen in love with space travel. But the dragon's ingrained responses to kindness remained deeply troubling. It hoarded food as if expecting it to be taken away, flinched when Sam moved too quickly, and constantly sought permission for basic activities. "You don't need my approval to access the ship's library," Sam explained after finding Ember waiting motionless in front of the computer terminal for hours. Previous. "Master said knowledge above basic function requirements was inappropriate for servants," Ember replied. Learning beyond designated parameters resulted in corrective measures. Sam felt his anger at the dragon's former owners flare again, but kept his voice gentle as he activated the library's full database for Ember's unrestricted, used the dragon's fascination with human history and philosophy, provided unexpected insights into its own species' nature. As Ember began to understand concepts like individual rights and personal dignity. Your species fought wars to end slavery. Among your own kind, Ember observed during one of their long conversations in hyperspace, yet other species continue these practices without interference. Humans tend to get involved in things that aren't technically our business, Sam admitted. It's gotten us in trouble before, but it's also how we sleep at night. The transformation in Ember became more pronounced as they traveled together, its scales growing brighter and its mental voice gaining confidence and personality beyond mere compliance. The dragon began offering genuine input on cargo routes and maintenance procedures, its unique perspective proving surprisingly valuable for someone who'd supposedly been treated as nothing more than property. But Ember's most deeply ingrained responses proved the hardest to overcome, particularly its instinct to offer violence. As a solution to Sam's problem's difficult client at Frontier Station 7, Ember noted after monitoring communication traffic, this servant could eliminate problem permanently if Master desires. I don't want anyone eliminated, Sam said firmly. And stop offering to kill people for me. That's not what friends do. The word friends seemed to hit Ember like physical force, and the dragon went very still as it processed the implications of a relationship between equals rather than owner and property. Humans form bonds with other species as equals? Ember asked hesitantly. Not as superior beings managing inferior ones. The best humans do, Sam replied. Though I'll admit we haven't always been good at it. Their partnership faced its first real test when pirates intercepted them near the Cascade Nebula, a common hunting ground for vessels carrying valuable cargo. Sam's usual strategy involved compliance and hoping the pirates would take his cargo and leave him alive, but Ember's presence complicated the situation significantly. Rare cargo indeed. The pirate captain's voice crackled over the comm as his boarding party forced their way onto Sam's ship. Living Dragon will bring premium price in the right markets. Sam stepped protectively in front of Ember, despite knowing his small plasma pistol was no match for the pirates' military-grade weapons. The dragon isn't cargo, Sam said firmly. It's my crew member. The pirates' laughter filled the cabin as they raised their weapons, clearly finding the idea of a dragon crew member hilariously naive. Stand aside, human, the pirate leader ordered. Dragon comes with us, and maybe you live to fly another day. Sam felt plasma fire sear across his shoulder as he refused to move. The pain immediate and intense, but not enough to make him abandon his friend. Something fundamental changed in Ember at that moment. Not the learned compliance of a trained servant, but the protective fury of a being defending someone it genuinely cared about. The small dragon's form seemed to expand as suppressed fire abilities returned in full force. Scales glowing like heated metal and wings spreading wider than should have been physically possible. Plasma flame erupted from Ember's maw with the fury of a miniature star, filling the cabin with heat that made the pirates' weapons too hot to hold. This is my friend. Ember's telepathic voice carried notes of controlled rage that made the pirates stumble backward. You will not harm him. The pirates fled toward their ship with burns and terror, their valuable prisoner now revealed as something far more dangerous than they'd bargained for. Sam slumped against the bulkhead, clutching his wounded shoulder while watching Ember slowly return to normal size. The dragon's protective fury fading as quickly as it had appeared. I did not act as trained weapon, Ember said uncertainly. I fought to protect someone I care about, not because I was ordered to do so. That's the difference between being a slave and being free, Sam replied, wincing as the medical scanner began treating his plasma burn. Free beings choose who they fight for and why, he continued. Slaves just follow orders. Ember curled up beside Sam as the ship's medical systems worked, both of them processing how their relationship had fundamentally changed in those moments of crisis. I understand now why you spent your fortune to buy my freedom, Ember said quietly. Not because you wanted to own me, but because you wanted me to own myself. Sam smiled despite the pain in his shoulder, knowing that his impossible purchase had accomplished something more valuable than either of them had realized. The small dragon beside him was no longer the broken creature he'd found in chains, but a free being who had chosen friendship over servitude and protection over compliance. As his ship continued toward their next destination, Sam reflected that he'd never made a better investment, even if it had cost him everything he owned. 3 months into their partnership, Ember finally felt safe enough to share memories that had been buried beneath layers of conditioning and trauma, beginning with images that made Sam question everything he thought he knew about dragon civilization. The first memory came during a quiet hyperspace jump when Ember was deep in meditation, accidentally projecting visions of towering crystal spires that rose from mountainsides like frozen lightning, reaching toward distant stars. "That was my home," Ember explained when Sam gasped at the beauty of the shared vision. "The city of whispered flames where my clutchkin and I learned the ancient ways before the raiders came." Sam found himself walking through Ember's memories of vast libraries carved from living stone, their walls lined with knowledge crystals that held the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of dragon civilization. "We were never the savage beasts described in Galactic Trade Consortium propaganda," Ember continued, sharing images of dragons, engaged in complex philosophical debates and scientific research. "My parents were keepers of the stellar paths, navigators who could guide ships through hyperspace using our natural connection to the cosmic energy flows that your instruments can only approximate." The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow. Dragons weren't just intelligent animals that happened to be useful as weapons or exotic pets, but members of an advanced spacefaring civilization with technology that complemented rather than competed with other species. "The fire we breathe is not mere flame," Ember demonstrated by producing a small controlled plasma burst that interfaced directly with the ship's power systems. "It is directed energy that can power vessels, fuel manufacturing, or serve as precise cutting tools." Sam watched in amazement as Ember's flame began recharging his ship's backup batteries with an efficiency that his conventional power systems couldn't match. "Our telepathic abilities allow instantaneous communication across vast distances without need for relay stations or subspace networks," Ember added. "A single dragon could coordinate entire fleets or maintain contact with colonies separated by hundreds of light years." The true scope of what had been lost became clear as Ember shared more memories. Dragons who could predict stellar phenomena through their energy sensitivity, engineers who designed structures that lasted millennia, and scholars who preserved knowledge from civilizations that had risen and fallen across the galaxy. "The Trade Consortium discovered our abilities centuries ago." Ember's mental voice carried notes of ancient grief, but rather than establishing diplomatic relations, they chose deception and exploitation. Sam felt sick as Ember explained how the consortium had systematically spread false information about dragons, portraying them as dangerous animals that threatened shipping lanes and colonial settlements. "They funded raids on our worlds, capturing young dragons while claiming to be protecting other species from our savage nature," Ember continued. "Those who resisted were labeled as particularly dangerous specimens requiring special handling. The neural dampeners weren't just tools of control, they were weapons of cultural genocide, designed to suppress not just individual abilities but access to the collective memory and knowledge that defined dragon civilization. Each dragon carries within them the shared experiences of their ancestors," Ember explained. "The dampeners sever that connection, leaving us isolated and vulnerable to reconditioning." Sam realized he was witnessing the systematic destruction of an entire species' cultural identity, disguised as animal training and sold to buyers who had no idea they were participating in slavery on an unprecedented scale. "How many of your people are still free?" Sam asked, though he dreaded the answer. "The last census before my capture counted fewer than 50,000 dragons remaining on unrated worlds," Ember replied. "Compared to the millions who lived in the crystal cities of my ancestors, the mathematics of extinction were horrifying. Dragons lived for thousands of years but reproduced slowly, meaning that even a few decades of systematic capture and killing could destroy a civilization that had existed since before humans learned to write. The consortium sells our young as pets or weapons while spreading propaganda about adult dragons being too dangerous to capture alive," Ember explained. "They ensure a steady supply of slaves while eliminating witnesses to our true nature." Sam found himself researching consortium records discovering shipping manifests that listed dragons, alongside luxury goods and exotic animals, with no recognition of their sentient status. The legal frameworks that governed galactic trade specifically excluded dragons from protection under sentient rights legislation, classifying them as dangerous fauna requiring special handling protocols. Your people don't know the truth either, Ember observed after reviewing Sam's research. Humans have been told the same lies as everyone else about dragons being mindless predators. Sam felt ashamed of his own species' ignorance, remembering childhood stories about brave knights slaying evil dragons that now seemed like propaganda, designed to justify ongoing atrocities. But humans are also the first species to question those stories when presented with evidence, Ember added. Your friend Will at Frontier Station 7 has been asking questions about dragon intelligence. Since our last visit, the cargo pilot Will Morrison had indeed been curious about Ember's obvious problem-solving abilities and technical knowledge, commenting that he'd never seen an animal demonstrate such sophisticated understanding. Other species accept the convenient fiction because it justifies profitable trade relationships, Ember continued. But humans seem uncomfortable with contradictions between observed reality and official explanations. Sam began to understand why Ember had been so confused by his kindness at the slave market. In a galaxy where dragons were treated as valuable animals, finding someone who recognized their personhood would have seemed impossible. There's something else you need to know, Ember said, sharing a memory that made Sam's blood run cold. The consortium is planning what they call the final harvest. The projected images showed massive military preparations, fleets of capture ships being outfitted with advanced neural suppression technology designed to subdue entire dragon populations simultaneously. Intelligence gathered by captured dragons indicates they plan to attack the last free dragon worlds within the next solar cycle. Ember explained. They want to eliminate organized resistance before our people can warn other species about the truth. Sam realized they were looking at genocide disguised as pest control, the final solution to the dragon problem that would leave only enslaved individuals scattered across the galaxy as exotic property. Once the free populations are eliminated, there will be no one left to contradict the official story about dragon nature, Ember said grimly. The survivors in captivity will be the only evidence of our species, and will be too broken to speak the truth. The weight of this knowledge settled on Sam like a physical burden. They weren't just dealing with individual cases of slavery, but with the systematic extermination of an entire civilization. We have to warn people, Sam said, though he knew how impossible that seemed for one cargo pilot and a dragon that most beings wouldn't even recognize as sentient. The question is whether anyone will listen to the truth when lies have been so much more convenient, Ember replied, and whether there's enough time to matter. Sam looked at his small friend and partner, seeing not just the individual he'd grown to care about, but a representative of an entire people facing extinction. Then we better get started, he said, beginning to formulate a plan that would either save a civilization or get them both killed. In the attempt, Ember's scales flickered with hope and determination as they began to discuss how two unlikely allies might challenge an entire galactic conspiracy built on lies and sustained by profit. The first human Sam contacted was his sister Lisa, a communications officer aboard the Colonial Defense Force cruiser Intrepid, who listened to his story with growing horror and disbelief. You're telling me that dragons are actually an advanced, spacefaring civilization and we've been buying their children as pets? Lisa's voice crackled with outrage over the encrypted channel. Sam transmitted Ember's recorded testimony, along with the memory fragments the dragon had learned to project into visual format, watching his sister's expression change from skepticism to fury as the evidence mounted. This isn't just slavery, Sam. This is systematic genocide being marketed as exotic pet sales, Lisa said after reviewing the materials. And humans have been unknowing participants in exterminating an entire species. Within hours, Lisa had shared the evidence with her commanding officer, who forwarded it through proper channels while also leaking copies to investigative journalists across human space. The human reaction was everything Sam had hoped for and more. Not calculation about profit margins or strategic advantages, but genuine moral outrage at the revelation that they'd been deceived into supporting mass murder. Colonial Defense Force Admiral Chen called an emergency session of the Human Colonial Council, where Ember's testimony was presented to representatives from every human world and station. "The evidence is clear," Admiral Chen announced to the packed assembly. "We have been lied to about the nature of dragons, and our ignorance has made us complicit in crimes against sentience itself." Sam watched the proceedings from his ship, amazed at how quickly human institutions mobilized when presented with evidence of systematic injustice, even when that injustice didn't directly affect human interests. The vote to condemn dragon slavery and demand immediate cessation of all trade in dragon specimens was unanimous, passed within 6 hours of the evidence being presented, but condemnation was only the first step. Intelligence reports confirmed that consortium forces were already moving toward the last free dragon worlds, and diplomatic protests would arrive too late to matter. "Admiral, we're receiving similar testimony from dragons throughout human space," reported Intelligence Officer Torres. "It seems that many dragons in human households have been afraid to reveal their true nature until now. The revelation that hundreds of dragons had been living as pets in human homes, hiding their intelligence to avoid worse fates, sent shockwaves through human society. Families who had thought they owned exotic animals discovered they had been unknowing slaveholders, while dragons who had spent years in silent captivity finally dared to speak. "My family bought me as companion for their children," testified a dragon named Sage through the colony's communication network. "I taught them to read and helped with mathematics while pretending to be clever animal." Similar stories poured in from across human space as dragons revealed themselves to their human companions, creating a wave of guilt, anger, and determination that swept through the colonies. Sam found himself at the center of a growing movement, as humans demanded not just an end to dragon slavery, but active intervention to prevent the planned genocide. The Colonial Defense Force lacked sufficient ships to challenge consortium military forces directly, Admiral Chen admitted during a strategy session, "but we cannot stand by while an entire civilization faces extermination." The solution came from an unexpected source: human civilian volunteers, including cargo pilots, merchant captains, and private ship owners who offered their vessels for a rescue operation. "We may not have military superiority, but we have something the consortium doesn't expect," Admiral Chen announced. "The willingness to risk everything for beings we've never met, simply because it's the right thing to do." The hastily assembled human fleet included everything from military cruisers to converted cargo haulers, united by a shared sense of moral obligation, rather than strategic necessity. Sam's ship became part of the Advanced Reconnaissance Force, with Ember serving as communication liaison with the free dragon populations they hoped to evacuate or defend. "Yuri. Species continues to surprise me," Ember observed as they approached the dragon homeworld of Pyrax Prime. "Other civilizations would calculate costs and benefits before acting. Humans are terrible at that kind of math," Sam admitted. "We tend to act first and worry about consequences later when people are in danger." The dragon homeworld was more beautiful than anything Sam had imagined. Crystal spires that caught starlight and transformed it into rainbow cascades. Cities that seemed to grow from mountain faces like natural formations. But the approaching consortium fleet cast shadows over the magnificent civilization that had created such wonders. Their capture ships equipped with neural suppression fields powerful enough to paralyze entire cities. "They plan to broadcast suppression waves that will render every dragon unconscious simultaneously," Ember explained, "monitoring consortium communications. Then they can collect us like fallen fruit." The human fleet arrived just as consortium forces began their attack, smaller and less heavily armed but driven by a sense of righteous fury that surprised their enemies. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," the command frequency crackled. "We're not here to conquer or claim territory. We're here to prevent genocide." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Humans fighting not for resources or strategic advantage, but purely to prevent the extinction of another species. Sam watched in amazement as civilian cargo pilots flew their ships between consortium capture vessels and dragon cities, using their hulls as shields to protect beings they'd never met. Dragon cities are launching defensive fighters, Ember reported with excitement. My people are joining the battle alongside their human allies. The combination of human determination and dragon abilities proved devastating to consortium forces, who had planned for a simple harvesting operation rather than a desperate defensive battle. Dragons guided human missiles through space with telepathic precision, while human pilots provided the aggressive tactics that dragon culture had never developed. Consortium fleet is retreating. It came the jubilant report from Admiral Chen. They're abandoning the harvest operation and withdrawing to neutral space. But victory in battle was only the beginning. The human fleet had rescued one dragon world, but dozens of others remained. Under consortium control, their populations already enslaved or eliminated. This cannot be the end of our efforts, Ember said as they surveyed the rescued dragon cities. My people throughout the galaxy still suffer in chains. Sam nodded, knowing that this single rescue operation had started something larger than either of them had imagined. A fundamental shift in how humans viewed their role in galactic civilization. Over the following months, human ships began appearing wherever. Dragons were being sold, not as buyers, but as liberators who recognized no authority's right to trade in sentient beings. The practice of keeping dragons as pets became socially unacceptable throughout human space. While rehabilitation centers helped formerly enslaved dragons rediscover their cultural identity, Sam and Ember found themselves at the center of a new kind of partnership. Not master and servant, but equals working together to heal the damage inflicted by generations of systematic oppression. You know, I never did become your servant, Ember observed one day as they planned another rescue operation. Their ship now equipped with both human technology and dragon energy systems. No, Sam agreed, watching his friend and partner coordinate with other liberated dragons across subspace networks. You became something much better. You became free. Their ship, now crewed by both species working as equals, represented a new model for galactic civilization, one where differences in abilities led to cooperation rather than exploitation. The Trade Consortium's empire of lies was crumbling as more species learned the truth about dragon intelligence and the systematic deception that had enabled their enslavement. And at the center of this transformation were two unlikely allies who had proven that sometimes the most important purchase a person can make is another being's freedom. The galaxy was slowly learning what humans had discovered through their own painful history, that the measure of a civilization isn't its power or wealth, but how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. Sam looked at Ember, no longer the broken creature he'd found in chains, but a proud representative of an ancient civilization reclaiming its place among the stars. Together, they had started something that would outlast both their lives. A friendship between species that proved freedom shared is freedom multiplied, and that the best partnerships are built not on ownership, but on mutual respect.